Today we've got a very special episode of Muscle Car of the Week as we have an exclusive interview with driver of the world's fastest Pontiac, Mr. Stan Antlocer.
We're sitting in front of Pontiac's last effort to win Superstock. There were 6 of these vehicles built. The car today, as you know, is so well known that all you have to do is mention it. And anybody that's been in racing knows, and it's been in 5 magazines, and everybody knew about it. It was actually filtered through a dealership. And back then, the dealer's names went on the car where the car was picked up from. And of course, when the dealer's name was on the car, they had full monetary responsibility for the car. Any parts that were needed, anything that had to be done to the car. And it wasn't a lot of money in those days, believe it or not. If they spent $4,000 all year, that was max. And of course, I owned the car. I bought the car at that time. I hate to tell you how much it was because it was pretty cheap when you think about it today. But it was $3,100. And that was as it was, all ready to go. Everything was set up, all ready to go. What happened is engineering actually built these cars. The body came off the assembly line. It went to engineering. They put the 4-speed transmissions in, the engines, and the rest of the parts to the car. The transmission, for one thing, the Street Tempest had a 2-speed automatic in the rear. It had no more than a 326 cubic inch. They had a HO engine. They called it HO. They had a little bit hotter cam and a 4-barrel carburetor on it. That was max. That was it. It came with the Super Duty 421 motor with the dual 4 barrels, the camshaft, all the latest parts, the 63 421 motors. And it did have the automatic transmission in it, but instead of having a cable drive from the motor to the transmission in the rear, it had an actual drive shaft. Also, we had a clutch assembly that when you took off, you let the clutch out for low gear, and then you shifted the automatic transmission. Took the car out to Detroit Dragway in April and made some runs with it. The car just didn't perform well, and of course with an automatic transmission you lose 20% of your horsepower right off the top, as well as we could only get a 3.9 gear. The 3.9 gear wasn't enough because in '62 I was testing gear ratios and transmissions to see what the best combination was, and the 430 was max for the Pontiac motor because it was out of horsepower at 5,800 RPMs. Because the motor has a maximum limit, and I learned it right off the bat. The torque is like 400 and some foot-pounds, like at 3,200 RPMs. The motor's good for, the horsepower runs out about 5,800. And I used to shift around 662, and that was it. I would shift about 6 to 62, and I only had 2 shifts from low to second to third, or to high gear. Torque on these engines was very low, and that was one of the deficits we kept trying to overcome by using different tire sizes and anything we could figure out. And there was no solution for a gear ratio. Well, I called engineering. They said that's the only gear ratio we had for the car. We thought, you know, Mickey Thompson put a 57 Pontiac rear end in his Tempest, took the automatic out and that, and he won the Nationals with it. So that was it. But I called up Bill and I said, Bill Klinger, and I said, Bill, we're going to put a 57 rear end in just like Mickey did. What do you want us to do? He said, give me a list of all your parts. We'll have part numbers on them. We'll submit them to NHRA so you can run the car legally. And I ran it the rest of the year for probably 3-4 months legally without nobody could protest. And if they did, the parts were there. We took the automatic out, measured everything, and got the 57 rear end, put a 430 gear in it, and we got it done, put it in, and boy, right away the car just, the mile an hour just went up, and when you increase mile an hour, you know you're increasing the horsepower. So we just, from there on, we just kept working with it, and winning races, of course, in between. We didn't run any more than a 430 in either the 389 or the 421, and with the right tire size, you'll be fine. You'll go through it 58 to 6,000 through the traps. The fastest speed was 123.95. That was at US 131. It was backed up with several 120 mile an hour runs. so it wasn't a fluke speed. The best ET it had was with the 10-inch slicks, of course. They got a better bite, and that was 1191. The car would run, and I went through the slips the other day because I wanted to see what the car turned. I wasn't sure. It had been so long since I really looked at them. The car was very consistent. If I could have run as fast against the Ram Chargers, I would have beat them, ET-wise. But I guess the tracks are different, as a lot of guys know, and that was the difference, because the car would run the low 12s with the 7-inch tires. The car weighed 3,200 pounds, and that was without gasoline, because it could, if we went to a track and raced like I did at Detroit before the Nationals, and we were underweight, we lost. So in order to keep the car legal, you got to respect the dealer. They're the ones putting the money in it, and Pontiac, with the car. So we kept everything as straight as it could be. The new 63 421 engineering redesigned the intake manifold, much better manifold. Compared to the old one, the carburetors were on an angle like that. The rear one was lower than the front one, so you didn't have as good fuel distribution to the engine. This one here was just very well done, and even the cutouts, if you see on the inside, it's not just 4 holes, it's like that. These two are are across from each other, and you have the other 2 separate. So it was to have better fuel distribution. And they also redesigned the heads, gave us bigger heads. That helped. Then of course they came out with the air scoop that you see on it now. That was an add-on item, along with an Iski 505 camshaft. 505 was actually the total lift of the valves by the camshaft, whereas the standard one we ran was a 447.447 lift.
Stan sold the car to buy his next race car and had not seen it since.
I was looking for the car for about 5 years in the 90s. I had guys across the country looking for it, but it didn't pan out. And it was sitting all that time, 40-some years, in a yard. Boy, January of '64. That was the last time I saw the car.
Until
today. I want to take my shoes off. Jesus, this car is clean. Boy, I don't know how I drove this as tall as I was, but oh. Clutch. Oh, there's a good clutch in here. And the gauges, everything is exactly the way it was. Okay, where's the keys? Let's get the right key.
we asked Stan what he thought about the restoration and his reunion with the world's fastest Tempest.
When you look at this car, you see the workmanship in it. It's better than when I had it brand new. Pretty solid for an old car.
We'd like to thank our guest Stan Antlocer for sharing his stories with us, and you can subscribe to our email list at MuscleCarOfTheWeek.com to never miss an episode of Muscle Car of the Week.